welcome back to my channel. My name is Kim if you're new here, and today I am going to share the birth story of my second child. For a little bit of a background, I have 4 children, 16, 14, 11, and 6. And we have birthday months. The boys are both born in October and the girls are both born in April. So in honor of their birthday months, I am going to be filming their birth stories this year. Or this cycle, I guess, because the girls' birthday will be in April of 2024. So I told my oldest son's birth story last week, and I am going to get my youngest son's birth story in this week, right in the end of October, but I'm still posting it in October, so we're all good. My boys are both they're almost exactly 2 years apart, not to the day, but within the same week. So I am going to start back a little bit farther, just a few little bits of information and parts of the story then I started with my oldest. So we, in between my boys, we moved from Texas to South Dakota. After my first son was born, my body never kind of went back into its regular cycles. I have always been very easily unbalanced by stress. And so my periods were irregular. That's going to be a key thing in this next part of the story. So we moved in between the boys, and I happened to get pregnant right around the time that we moved, but I didn't know that. So then a few months later, I started to feel maybe like I was pregnant, and I took a test and it was positive. But I didn't think that I was very far along just because I just started feeling, you know, sick and everything. So I did not make an appointment. I started to find a new OBGYN in the new town that we lived in and asked people, you know, who they recommended. But I was in no rush. I have always kind of been like, if I go once or twice in the first trimester, I'm good. There's not a whole lot they can do in the first trimester if you're relatively healthy and have no complications with your previous one. It's just to kind of get some, you know, lay down some groundwork for future visits. So I thought I was doing great. I ended up scheduling an appointment, wasn't in a rush, thought I was getting in at the 10 to 12 week mark. We go in and I find out that I am actually 18 weeks along, and they can tell me the sex of my baby, and we have all sorts of other things to do. So I was really shocked, and this second pregnancy seemed very, very short because of that. Everything ended up being totally fine. It was a good second pregnancy. One thing about both the pregnancies with my boys is I was sick the entire time I was pregnant. It wasn't just a first trimester kind of thing. I was just always a little bit nauseous and always a little bit angry. Something about being pregnant with boys really just made my temper rise a little bit. So my husband persevered and we survived, and we have wonderful little boys too, or big boys now, but wonderful boys to show for it. So anyway, this pregnancy seemed super short, and so let's kind of get into the birth story part of it. So we had family come into town for my oldest's second birthday, and my mom and sisters made a joke about because my mom was gonna come back into town to watch our oldest son when we did go into labor. So I think my mom did bring a bag in case she had to stay, in case I went into labor that weekend or something. So she did bring one, and then my sister made a joke. I think it was my sister. She made a joke about, "Mom, I bet you'll go home tonight and have to come back tomorrow." And that's pretty much what happened. The party went wonderfully, and then we celebrated my oldest son's second birthday, and then everyone went home and I got a chance to relax. My husband went to work the next day, and I started to have some leakage, like my water was breaking but not fully breaking. And so I was like, I really didn't know what to do. I called my husband, told him I was gonna call the hospital and see what they suggested. They did tell me that I should probably come in and go to triage so they could see if I was having any contractions, if I was dilated, if the fluid was amniotic fluid, or if I just had some time. So I wasn't quite at 37 weeks yet. I was at like 36 weeks and 6 days. Because I think, yeah, 36 weeks and 6 days. So the following day I would have been at 37 weeks along. And at that time, 37 weeks for both of my boys was considered full term. But before that is considered a premature birth. But I was like, it's just a day away. It's gonna be fine. You know, my husband, he arranged to get off of work. We take my 2-year-old son, we go to the hospital to triage. I call my mom. She's kind of on standby. She's like, let me know what they tell you. You know, if you're going into labor, she's a few hours away. So we'd have to keep my son for a little bit. When we moved, we didn't really have any support system where we moved to help with children. And so we did it with my mom's help, though she did live a few hours away, or on our own. So we go in, we check in through the emergency room. They take us up to this triage unit, you know, just a quiet place with some beds, and they hook up the monitor to see if I'm having any contractions. They test the fluid and all that stuff. So we're just kind of waiting, keeping my oldest son happy. I'm sure we did bring a bag of some books, and probably he was very much into toy cars and those animal figurines. And so I'm sure we brought a few of those, and some snacks probably, because we had no idea what this was going to be, how long it was going to be. I'm very thankful that it wasn't a quick thing, like, oh bam, your water breaks, let's get you going, and stuff like that. It was a slow pace because I was concerned about what we were gonna do with my oldest son. So they monitor for a little bit, the tests come back, and it is amniotic fluid, so my water was breaking slowly. I wasn't having very regular contractions at that time, but since my water was breaking, they wanted to go ahead and get me admitted to the hospital and talk about either fully breaking my water, starting me on Pitocin, things like that. Again, I was a little bit more knowledgeable this time around than my first time. The first time I had no clue, but this time I was a little bit more aware. I had talked about certain things with the OBGYN, and you know, kind of had some basic knowledge about how things could go and what to expect. My doctors we did transfer my medical files, and did know that my first child came very quickly, and normally your first child tends to be your longest. And so they were concerned, one, with the fact that my water was breaking. They don't like it to be broken for too long because infection can set in, and they don't want you to have your water broke and not go into labor for, you know, very long. They like you to get it done. And then two, because my first labor was very quick for a first one, about 6 hours total from when my water broke to when we had a baby in our arms. So they were just being very proactive. I called my mom. She was like, okay, I'm grabbing my stuff, I am on my way. But we had to hang tight for 2.5 hours till she got to the hospital. which was fine. It wasn't progressing too quickly anyway. We got admitted. I do not remember my son being a problem at all. He kind of played with toys and wandered around the room, and I think he sat in the bed with me, but he did not like it because they had the IV in my hand, and that he did not like that, and it kind of scared him, so he didn't want me to hold him, and that really kind of broke my heart a little bit. I understood it, but I was going through some stuff emotionally too, because I was getting ready to welcome this other baby who I was so excited for, but then my current baby, he didn't want me to hold him, and I knew that it would get better, but I was sad. I was sad because I just wanted my baby. They hooked me up to stuff. They did put me on some drip Pitocin just to get things going. With the Pitocin, I guess if you're gonna have it, I really don't think I needed it necessarily, and they turned it off after a little while because the contractions were coming too strong and too quickly for how far I was, or for how much I was dilated. And so if they had kept that up, my baby would have gone into distress, and that would have been a whole nother issue. But thankfully I had a nurse in the room with me this time, the whole time, and she was monitoring things like that and could adjust as needed. So I was on Pitocin for a little bit, a couple hours. It did jumpstart my contractions. When they started to get too intense, they backed it down, so I didn't have to be that intense for too long. Again, my plan was to do a natural birth because, again, I am scared of needles, and I was kind of like, you know, I did it fine the first time. I got it. I got this, right? I mean, I did, but it was a little overconfident. And this time it was totally fine. My mom showed up. She stayed in the room for a little bit. We visited, and then my husband walked her and our son down, switched car seats, I believe, so our son could have a car seat in my mom's car, gave her the keys. And then, yeah, she was gonna take care of our dog and our first little baby, who was gonna be our big boy now. So, okay, after my mom left, then we kind of started to get serious about this having a baby business. I think my husband, yeah, he probably got some food at some point. I don't think I ate. Maybe I did. I don't remember. That kind of stuff is a blur. I remember, you know, at some point maybe I probably had some juice or ice or something like that. The contractions were, yeah, getting more intense. I was in the hospital a little bit longer because of the slow start, but by the late evening, things were picking up. Doctors, you know, kind of had been checked. Oh, and when I was admitted at the beginning, I was like at 2.5 to 3 centimeters. So about the same as with my first, about the 37-week mark there. When I went into labor, I was already dilated to a 3, which I mean, I've always heard that it takes the longest to get to 5, and then from 5 to 10, it's generally the quickest. I was already over halfway through the hardest part of dilation when I would go into the hospital. We just, you know, labored for the next few hours. Things started to pick up around, I don't remember the time, but my son was born at around 11:30 at night. And because he was 30 minutes shy of turning 37 weeks, we had to have the whole NICU unit in the room with us. Excuse me. We had to have the whole NICU unit in the room with us because they needed to do some other tests and make sure things were okay and he was breathing fine. You know, I know why they do it and I have no problem with it. It just sometimes seems, when I think about it, a little silly with just that 30 minutes. If I had been 30 minutes later, or, you know, 31 minutes later or whatever, they wouldn't have had to be in there. I'm sure, I don't know, they wouldn't have been in there. So the lady who was on call at the hospital, since this is a different hospital, this is not the doctor that I had been seeing for all my appointments. They kind of have, you know, the on-call OBGYN doctor who makes the rounds and everything. Well, so she had been checking on me all day, and then when I was ready to go, dilated, ready to push, or right around there, when the nurses were all getting set up and they paged her, she was actually in a room with another patient who was having some complications. And so again, the nurses start panicking a little bit, and they're like, we have to page another doctor. Just wait a minute. Don't push. And I'm like, again? Why? How come every time I'm having a baby, I can't push when I want to push? So the doctor that they were paging was, I guess, the next one on the list, and they're like, are you okay that it is a male doctor? And at that point, like, I had been going to an OBGYN who was a female, the other one on call was a female, but honestly, at that point, I didn't care. I just wanted someone to help me get this baby out so I can get this done. So I was like, yeah, that's fine, let's do it. So he must have got there really fast, because what I remember is, let's see, I'm in the bed again, my husband's standing to the left, I had the nurse to the right who's been with us this whole time. We've got the NICU unit here with a lot of people, like they had a bed. I mean, there was like more nurses than there were for me, and then there was some other nurses getting things ready. And I'm kind of starting to go tunnel vision, like is per normal for me when it gets pretty intense, and I'm just kind of focusing, listening to my husband and the nurse here. I hear someone come in the door. You can tell the nurses kind of like, okay, whew, he wasn't even, I didn't even, like, he was in the room, and the nurses are like, okay, you can go ahead and push if you need to push. I'm like, he's not even here. But I guess with him in the room, they're fine. He washes his hands, kind of scrubs up. I remember he shakes my husband's hand, says, hi, I'm gonna be your doctor today. Start pushing. My son comes out. He catches my son. I think my husband cut the umbilical cord, and then I did tear a little bit. So as soon as my baby was out, they whisked him over to the little NICU unit they had set up in the end of the room so they could check him out. Well, I got cleaned up, tidied up, and a couple stitches, I believe, but no episiotomy this time. This hospital did not, episiotomies were only reserved for like special cases, I guess. Whereas 2 years ago when I had my first one, that was just, that's what she went for. This was another one that was pretty easy, a pretty easy delivery, and my son was good. He checked out just fine for being just under the limit. He was 7 pounds 8 ounces, so he was a little bit bigger than my other one, and right around that 20-inch mark. None of my babies, I don't think, were 21 inches. They were around 19 to 20 inches. One issue we did have with him being a little younger was some blood sugar issues, especially because nursing, well, I always do try, it never came supernatural. It never came very natural to me. I always wanted to do it, and each baby I learned more about it, but it was not an easy journey for any of my children and me for nursing. So yeah, he did struggle with some blood sugar issues, and they had to keep doing little heel pokes until I had had enough, and I had said, we're gonna go home and we will come back and we will check his blood sugar. One of them, I think they read wrong, because they have to be a certain level for a certain amount of time, and because babies who are younger don't have a lot of brown fat, and the brown fat is what sustains them when they're transitioning from being out of the mother and before your milk comes in, generally. If you have a formula fed baby, or if your milk comes in very fast, generally those aren't as big of an issue in a normal, regular, healthy baby. But my milk doesn't come in fast, and I really didn't want to formula feed if possible. Another issue we did have for the first time with my son here was jaundice. He did have jaundice, and he did have to, we ended up having to check out a Billy blanket, which makes him look like a little glowworm, because the jaundice ordeal was very tough for me postpartum, trying to adjust. I don't have a super big support system. At this time, I have a 2-year-old at home. My husband doesn't get very much time off from his job. My mom did come to stay, I think, for 2 weeks, which was super duper helpful, because with the Billy blanket, which is a great technology thing because I don't have to go into the hospital every day to have him under these lights, but it's a blanket, it's a little tube blanket. It looks like almost like a heating pad that lights up, that wraps around their torso. Then you put their clothes on kind of over it, and you plug it in, and the lights process out the bilirubin, get rid of the jaundice. My son, his levels got to be pretty high, into the 20s, and I remember being at church and crying about it at church. And one other I don't know, someone probably asked me, how are you doing? And I just started crying, because that's kind of what I do. If you ask me how I'm doing and I'm having a hard time, I tend to be like, I'm okay, and then start crying. Even now, I'll go to a chiropractic appointment and they're like, how you doing? And it's like, I'm fine. But I started bawling, and all these other women came around me, and lots of them told me that their babies had jaundice too. And one of them said that their son had it and his level was like 26 or something, but he's fine. Like, some scary things about high levels of jaundice is sometimes they tell you that it could affect something with your brain. I need to do some more research. It's been years and years. He's 14 now, and he's super duper smart, and no ill effects from that. And so, but that was one thing that you have to be really diligent about, keeping that blanket on, having them under the lights. You don't get to just snuggle and cuddle them. I mean, you do, but it's different. And so, you know, it was trying. And when you think of all the other things that could have gone wrong, it was nothing. But when you're dealing with the hormones and all these changes, like, it was this big thing. It was huge to me in my head, and it all worked out, and we got through it, and just a few more doctor's appointments, and he was fine, and we could return the blanket, and it was all good. I think by the time my mom left at the 2-week mark, we were pretty much done with it. And so having her there was very helpful to me while I was dealing with all of this stuff. And it makes me definitely want to try to make that a priority for me. If my children want me there to help them when they're having children, I want to be able to be there, because it may not feel like you're doing much, but sometimes just having another person there to depend on helps. Even if it's just helping me take care of myself. I remember during that time I would be trying to nurse my son, and my mom would make me some scrambled eggs and toast, and that was just amazing because I didn't have anyone else to do that for me. And I really appreciate it. I'm just gonna pop in here while I'm editing this and say that I am very thankful for my second son. He is amazing and wonderful, and he is exactly what I needed for a second son. I don't know if any of you other mothers will, or parents will, relate to this, but sometimes some kids are high maintenance and sometimes their siblings are not, and the balance is nice. And so when I did have my second son, it was nice to have someone who, even from a young baby, he did not require, I'm not gonna say did not require as much attention, because he does. He was just a very easygoing baby, and it was very nice. It was what I needed at the time. I'm also very proud of the young man that he is becoming. He is getting ready to go into high school next year, and I am going to miss him immensely, immensely. it'll be hard to not have him at home anymore. So quick bit about nursing. My son here, he ended up being tongue-tied, and nursing was incredibly painful, incredibly painful. I toughed it out for about 5 months before I had to be done. No one told me he was tongue-tied. This is something I had to learn. So yeah, so no one in an appointment said anything that I can remember about him being tongue-tied. He definitely was, and I think still is a little bit, but it doesn't affect his speech or anything. But because of that, he didn't get a proper latch, and again, I had no one really to guide me through it. When we were in the hospital, we did have the lactation consultant come in and see that we were doing things right, and they're kind of like, yeah, everything looks good, we'll just let us know if you need help. But I was not good about that. I didn't want to go to another appointment. I didn't want to do that. So I never contacted them again. I never reached out for help when I should have, but mentally it was just a lot. I didn't want to take my 2-year-old and my newborn and go to an appointment and try to nurse under a stressful situation. That's just not something that I had the reserves for, so I didn't. So after about 5 months, it was just too painful, and we switched to formula in a bottle, and that was fine. It was fine, and you know, the baby, he got his nourishment. My first one, he got his nourishment, and it's all about making sure that they are healthy and fed and loved and cared for, and they were fine. I was a little bit became a little bit of an obsession with me between my second and third, and we will talk about that more in April. But yeah, I mean, you just kind of have to learn to do what's best for you and the baby. The pain, I mean, he was getting food. He was one of my, well, between my two, he was my chunkiest baby. Honestly, in the pictures, I think he's my chunkiest baby overall. But so he was getting nourishment. It was just really painful for me, and I would like wince, and it was, you know, every time after 5 months, you know. So I couldn't do it anymore. That was something, yeah, I had to come to terms with. Felt like a failure a little bit, but then when I realized about the tongue tie thing, because of course I became obsessed and then did research and all of that, and it made sense. And so yeah, again, you do better when you know better, and just give yourself a little bit of grace, and you know, trust that everything is going to work out. And you know, if you do your best by your kids, they're going to be fine. They are going to be just fine. Well, that is the end of my second birth story. Again, if I forgot something or there's a piece of information that I should or you want to know, let me know in the comments and I will let you know what the answer is. I appreciate you watching. Thank you for sticking with it to the end, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.